Derby County manager John Eustace has just completed his pre-match press conference as Derby County have been preparing for their game on Saturday afternoon against Queen's Park Rangers. Now, it's an absolutely huge game for Derby County as they look to score back-to-back victories for the first time in the EFL Championship this season, and it's a huge game, a massive game for John Eustace, and one which he has so much to talk about in regards to what Derby County can do. Now, we discussed the great buzz around the training ground and how they bounced back with an excellent victory after such a poor performance versus Oxford, and we're going to get into that and much more in this video. So if you have not done so already, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. But let's get into it. Now, Ibu Adams is expected to be missing from this game, and when I say expected, it's guaranteed to be missing this game. With 5 yellow cards, that equals a suspension for the Gambian midfielder, and ultimately that means that Derby County are without any senior central midfielders in order to replace him. Or are they? Now, John Eustace dropped a little bit of a snippet that Thompson would be joining back in with the squad tomorrow, hopefully with a potential opportunity to be involved on Saturday. But ultimately, as you and I both know, it would be very risky to chuck Thompson in after such a long layoff. Now, there were so many other things which John Eustace discussed, so let's get through all of them. He was discussing Tuesday's performance, and as much as the first half was very much terrible, the attitude was great, and the shape change at half-time was one which was very much needed, and ultimately that helped Derby County create some great chances in that second half, and ultimately Derby County could have scored 3 or 4 in that second half, with Carlton Morris having a couple of opportunities. Patrick Adjumang had a couple as well, and I think there was one for Briatan Diaz, although that may have been the first half. Now, John Eustace was keen to say that during that first half we weren't aggressive enough, and ultimately he put that down to the fact that they hadn't really had the opportunity to fully work on the plan that they tried to put on Norwich City, and ultimately that was one of the things which sort of didn't work out for Derby County on Tuesday. Now, he was also discussing that the problem that they faced with players potentially not being necessarily fit enough in order to compete with the first half plan, and ultimately that is what led to the change at half time with bringing in a player like Sondre Langas, who he went on to discuss that having him in the group is absolutely great, and it gives the opportunity to have another fantastic character and a great leader back within the group. He did say that he was hobbling about a little bit yesterday, but he was back on the grass today and back to work. But we don't want to ask too much too soon of Sondre Langas. Now, we're going to discuss injuries and things like that in a video which will probably have been out at 10 o'clock this morning, and we will be live tonight from 5 p.m, 6 p.m, in order to discuss Derby County and everything that could happen over the course of the next few days. We might not actually be live at 6 p.m. I am lying there. But I'll let you know. We will be live at some point to discuss it. But it's one of those things where we've got to be careful with Sondre Langas. We've got to be careful with what we do with those players returning from injury. And John Eustace did point that out. He said that it was a great performance, but we have to protect him. We can't put him in that position where he ends up breaking down again and ultimately misses out on more football for me. And John Eustace agreed with that as well. He said the move to the back three is a possibility, but the aim is for this squad to be flexible, and we've got great competition for places across both formations of playing a back three or potentially even a back four, which is obviously huge. Ed Dawes was asking a question about the front three and how within that second half it seemed to all click, and gave them a little bit of a new lease of life, which I don't necessarily disagree with. And John Eustace was keen to point out that that was all to do with the defensive structure which they applied in the second half, which allowed them to apply more pressure. It got the forwards into better areas. And the main point that John Eustace was keen to make, that as much as that worked against Norwich, we've got to back that up now on Saturday, and then so on and so forth. And we haven't won enough at home, and John Eustace was keen to point that out as well. And his aim is that we've got to follow up the second half on Tuesday with another competitive performance. And if we do compete, there's always a chance that we can win. And he hopes that we've seen the last of the Oxford-type performances, but ultimately you've got to earn the right to play. But the attitude was a different class on Tuesday, and he hopes that Saturday will be along the same lines. Now, obviously, Ebel Adams is suspended. John Eustace suggested there is a couple of options for him to go with in order for Derby County to be able to move forward heading into Saturday's fixture. Obviously, as we discussed earlier, Liam Thompson could potentially be back within the group. However, I don't believe he'll play. If I'm completely honest, I just don't think it would make sense to force him back in. Although, yes, he's a natural central midfielder, I just don't think it's the right call. Now, it was risky. It would be risky to start him after 6 weeks, as I mentioned earlier on in this video. But ultimately, they've got to get the game plan right from the off. They need more pressure on the ball and get the tactics right from the first half into the second, not just for the second half. That's something which Derby County have to be on with and right with heading into this game this Saturday, because QPR have had a fairly good start after, what was it, a 7-0, 7-1 thrashing from Coventry City earlier on this season. They have had a decent start since then. They've got a good coach, they're well organised, and they also have a very stable squad. And they've even brought back players who they had on loan. You look at someone like Koki Sioto, who Derby County were after in the summer. Very, very good player, and certainly someone who could have an impact this weekend. Now, Ed Dawes asked a question in regards to QPR being a bit of a bogey side. You obviously go back to John Eustace's first game in charge, 4-0 thrashing. You go back to the last few years, and ultimately Derby County have always struggled facing up against QPR. But I've always thought that at home we normally beat them, so it will be interesting to see what does happen. And John Eustace was keen to point out that he doesn't want to look at any team as a bogey side, and he was keen to discuss how much he's developed as a coach since his days at QPR when he was partnered with Steve McLaren, if I remember rightly. And obviously, since making the move throughout his managerial career, he's used different players, different styles, and ultimately is very happy with the group that he has now. Now, obviously, a huge bone of contention going into Saturday is going to be who plays in central midfield. Now, there's a couple of options. I put my thoughts on that out on Twitter. I can't remember I think it was earlier on today. And ultimately, it is great. It is interesting to see where it could go for Derby County. If we go and find the squads that I've put together, all of them I've done in a 3-4-3 with Sondre Langas starting and a front three of Brewster, Adjumang and Morris. One of them has Clark starting in midfield. One of them has Joe Ward. We'll get into that in a moment. And one of them has Owen Eames stepping up from the academy. There's also a shout for the likes of Cruz Allen. I would have said Harry Hawkins, but I believe he's on loan at Bedford Town at the moment. So let's get into Bobby Clark a little bit. The most natural option for me. Bobby Clark can play in that deeper role. He's not necessarily a sitting midfielder, but he can certainly be a little bit of a deep lying playmaker, and sort of that gives Derby County a different option across the course of midfield. You then look at Joe Ward. Again, do I think Joe Ward's a central player? Not really, but do I think he could play there? Absolutely. His technical ability is outrageous. I think he's got a very good cross of a ball. You look at some of the crosses Lewis Travis put in from those deeper areas earlier on this season, and I think that Joe Ward could sort of take up that role. Obviously has that sort of defensive acumen for playing wing back and things like that, and also has the ability to go forwards in regards to him playing in that forward position over the course of certain periods during his career. And then obviously you've got the unknown option of Owen Eames, Cruz Allen, something like that, Marcel Toller. Although realistically, I would anticipate it'll be Bobby Clark, to be completely honest. Now, obviously, you can let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments if you have not done so already. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye, guys.